Hello, I want to welcome you to another episode of Vulnerable Voices. Remember, Vulnerable Voices is a weekly podcast hosted by EJA from Dallas, Texas, and Doc Miller from Albany, New York. Two leaders in education coming together every Wednesday for an entertaining podcast that will engage you in uncensored, uncut, hilarious, transparent conversations with real leaders about real issues, real stories, and thought-provoking questions. This podcast is for you. If you're a real leader experiencing real issues on this leadership journey, remember, check us out, Vulnerable Voices, every Wednesday on iTunes and YouTube. And I am EJA, and I'm going to start out with our weekly intro. Just words of thought opening up this podcast today. Paul, I want to honor a fallen hero today, and that would be my grandmother. She was born in 1932. She lived a very productive life. She was the first female millionaire that I ever knew. And that was huge to me. Even though she had no high school education, she left school second, third year in high school, got married typically as those women did in that time. But she went on to be very successful. She worked as a cafeteria worker in a local school district for years. And through all of that, she still maintained her independence and was definitely the strongest woman I know. So I just want to give a shout out to Maureen Massenberg, one of my true heroes. She will be missed. I love you, Momo, and I will see you again one day. And I want to give a huge shout out to all of the support that I've received from you, Paul. Thanks for calling and checking on me. From friends, which I call my family, that have showed up, showed out, colleagues calling and checking every day. And so it's wonderful when you work with people that truly love you and show you. And so I just want to say thank you, and you guys inspire me.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that with me and with everybody. And I know that's got to be tough. I have also lost my grandparents, so I definitely know how that feels. You know, you said something interesting to me. You said she was the first female millionaire that you knew.
First millionaire that I knew.
So that was that had to take some leadership to get there. I know this is a little off topic, but you know, in maybe 60 seconds or less, how did she make that mark? What did she do to get there?
She was a saver. So she saved every dime she could. And she experienced an unfortunate death with her husband. And so she did receive a settlement offer from that. And she allowed her money and taught me how to take what you have and make it grow. And so from that, she was a millionaire, and it was very impressive. She didn't give out much money, of course, but she used to always say, you can feed anybody. And don't necessarily give them your money, but you can give anybody a plate to eat. And so that's something that I learned. You be conservative, but you still help people.
Gotcha. Okay. That's good stuff. Well, that's definitely impressive. And I'm sure out of her struggle, you've learned a lot, and, you know, she'll be with you always. So that's much love and respect to your grandmother.
Thank you.
You know, today I know that we're talking about COVID and reopening schools, and what does that look like? And COVID and reopening schools. Recently, there was an article that Dr. Fauci put out explaining that COVID, if we don't do something, that it could increase at 100,000 people a day, which is crazy. And so, you know, I thought it was important that we discuss this and we talk about this, because there's a lot of talking about it from the actual of what's going on, but also How does it affect leaders? And so when you think about COVID in the different generations, with Generation Z and the millennials, they have not necessarily taken this as seriously as I think some of us would hope they would have. I think recently on the news today, they were talking about that they are having COVID parties in Alabama. I believe it was in Alabama where they were having COVID parties. And at these COVID parties, people were coming to, and the first person who received COVID won the bet. So they would have a bet and they would make money off of the first person who received it. And so now they were having this, I think it was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And so it's a huge thing. And I believe it was happening in a few different places across the globe. I think even in New York State, it happened a little bit, where there's some COVID parties.
So Paul, let me make sure that I'm understanding. Let me make sure I got this. So you're telling me that a group of young people under the age of 40 are getting together in large groups.
Yes, ma'am.
And the first one to get COVID is the winner.
And they win some type of monetary prize, yes.
Disturbing.
Now, I'm assuming that it's people that look like this and not like this. But, you never know. I don't know. That's an assumption. So I could be making an ass out of you and me with that assumption. But I would assume that it's the others that are doing that.
Well, Paul, I've been speaking to those of the younger age who look like me. And I'm here to tell you, many of those people, they don't really get it. They don't believe that it's something that can really, hurt them and impact them. And that's sad. As a matter of fact, really close friend of mine, she called me today, and she has a 26-year-old, and she explained that her child, against her better judgment, decided to go to Miami. My thing is, well, the beaches and everything will be closed. What are you gonna do? But it's like falling on deaf ears. It's kind of sad, Paul.
So when I think about that, I think about it from a leadership perspective. So I think different states have had different responses to COVID. And so when I think about the different states having different responses, I think their followers have had different responses as well, because not only has it came directly from the top of that state, it also has trickled down to the media, it's trickled down to the TV, the commercials. So I'm from New York, and Cuomo has probably taken the strongest stance of any of the governors in the entire country. And so where he's shut things down, he's tiered things, he's made it very, very known that he wanted to do whatever it took to keep people safe, even if it was unpopular and unpopular economically. And so from his standpoint, I think New Yorkers got a different dose of it. New Yorkers got a different dose where we are extremely careful, like we're wearing a mask everywhere. And so, like right now, I happen to be in Georgia. I'm in Atlanta now, and I was a little fearful of traveling, but I made it down here. But I've been staying out the way. I've been staying pretty much in the house, and also, but when I notice I have to go to the store, people aren't wearing masks. People aren't taking it as seriously. They're out and about here, and I believe that a lot of the states, including Texas, where you're at, governors opened early because of economic reasons and because of the pressure and being aligned with certain political parties, and felt the need to follow along versus doing what's best for their constituents. And so that's kind of my thought process. What have you seen in Texas as far as that?
Well, I've seen, like you're saying, the reopening early. 2 major cities. I'm here in Dallas and I work out of Houston, and Houston is almost at capacity with their ICU beds, which is very disturbing. Numbers are continuing to go up every day. And so now they're rolling back those openings. They have closed bars again, places that sell liquor. You can't consume liquor on the premises, in hopes of alleviating, large crowds and not having many people come out. So you see a reverse um, in how they were opening and ready to continue, full blown, and that's being reversed now. There's a lot of rural counties in Texas, and like I told you, we buried my grandmother this week, and so I had to travel through some rural towns, and in fact she resided in a rural town, and there were absolutely no masks being used. I went to, local places, Panera Bread, to use good Wi-Fi, because that was a struggle there, and no mask. And in fact, people would look at myself as I was out of place because I had on my mask. So it's a different scenario, particularly in the rural communities here in Texas.
So here's my fear, is that because the message is being sent differently from the top, and so the message just kind of filters down and spreads out, and a lot of time, as people don't always lead with their own minds. They follow what everyone else is doing, and so if the masses are doing this, then it must be okay, until someone mess around and gets sick. I think I read something that if you wear a mask, you have you only have a 3% chance at contracting. Now, the mask doesn't stop COVID, but it prevents. If everybody wears a mask, it stops people from spreading their own germs. Without it, you got about a 17% chance of contracting COVID. So I believe that's a statistical significance for all our stats people out there.
That is exactly what that is.
And I think the difficult part is that people aren't educating themselves. They're not hearing that. But my biggest fear, going back to that, is now being school leaders and being in charge of children. If the message is different in different states, I don't care if it's in New York, Texas, Georgia, wherever it is. How do we keep kids safe if the messages about safety are different? And so are the schools in Texas or Georgia or one of the other states where or I believe Arizona, where there's Nevada, where they're having these issues and where they opened up too early, are they really going to take the time to open in a way that's going to keep kids safe? So what are our responsibilities to do so? And I think that's what I was hoping that, we can have a dialogue about, and let's talk about it from a leadership perspective, because I believe we have some responsibilities. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree 100%. And just one more note on the mask situation. We're asking for a vaccine. What kind of treatment would be given, to a person infected with COVID? And the reality is we kind of have therapy already. We have a treatment, a mechanism. It's a mask, right? So if you incorporate the mask, like you said, your percentage of infection goes down that chance dramatically. So using the mask is going to be essential, which leads into that question you asked about reopening of schools. And here in Texas, our commissioner has said that we will reopen based off of the governor's recommendations. Schools will reopen. However, parents will receive an option. So parents can choose whether to have their children attend face-to-face, or they will not be penalized if they do allow them to stay at home and do at-home learning. With that being said, what does it look like inside of the school building? Well, here in Texas, there is no mandate for students to return with masks. It's a local decision. So going back to the leadership concept, the leadership is vague. And so, it's just continuing to spin the wheel and put it off at the leader at a lower level. And it just continues to go down, and nobody knows what to do.
So if the leaders don't make good decisions, there's going to be some kids who are going to get this, and there's going to be some kids who are in jeopardy. Like, I just, being here in Georgia, I had some conversation with some school leaders recently, or some people who are on the school board, and I won't mention the district, and some even superintendent, and we had some conversations, and the plan currently is to bring kids all back to school, and they just have to wear masks. They didn't really talk about social distancing. They didn't talk about, and I'm not saying they will or won't social distance, but they didn't talk about any of that. And so, again, because I believe New York has set a different precedent with Governor Cuomo's leadership, and not that I agree with everything that the man does, but I believe he's handled this really well, is that it's serious. Like, for example, I believe we just had a graduation. And so 2 weeks before the graduation, he said that we're allowed to have outside graduations. So it wasn't substantial time to plan an outside graduation, even though it could have been done, I'm sure. But quite a few people and schools in New York State did. However, there's been a few schools that have shown that they have contracted COVID from these graduations, right? And so my thought was, I understand graduation is important. I understand it's crucial. It is a monumentous time. We work for years to get our kids to graduation. We bend over backwards to help our students, and they have to fight through all kinds of obstacles to get through, and their parents do everything. Graduation is amazing. It's an emotional, beautiful time, but ain't nothing more important than our kids' health and our parents' health. And so with that decision, I had to make a hard decision. I decided to have a completely virtual graduation. And it wasn't due to laziness. It wasn't due to we couldn't figure out how to make something happen. But we had a beautiful ceremony we went through it virtually, and we had also safely had each student come in and and we had like a 16-minute video where each student got to walk across the stage. It's not the same as being live, but we still had to put together the best experience that we could. And my point being was, there were some parents who were upset. There were some parents who thought it was a bad decision. There were some kids who were upset about this and felt like we did all this for nothing because we didn't get to graduation. And as a leader, I'm okay with them being upset. Like, I'm okay being comfortable. Right. I'm being uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, I did what I had to do to keep them safe. I did not put anybody's child at risk. We still celebrated. It wasn't what they wanted, but the decisions had to be made to keep people safe. And I think that's one of the messages that I really need to get out there, is whether it's popular or not, you got to do what's right. And you got to do what's going to keep people safe. You need to keep people out of harm's way. God forbid we had this in-person graduation, people didn't adhere to the rules that we put in place, and somebody contracted COVID and somebody died. I mean, I had one of my good friends who almost died. He called me and thought he was going to die. He said to me, help take care of my wife and kids, and was talking about his funeral arrangements. And they said if he didn't get to the hospital when he did, he was about 24 hours from dying because he didn't have enough air in his lungs.
This is real. And we have a responsibility as leaders, like you said, to do the right thing. And we know what's right is not always what's popular. But I always say, can you live with yourself with the decision that you made? And if you're good with that, and you feel like it was the right thing for children, then kudos to you, Paul. You have to do what's best for the children you serve. That's your job as a leader. Absolutely. So with the reopening of schools, what is your plan there? How will that look at your campus? So, and again, I believe that in the 12 P's, piss poor planning produces piss poor performance produces pain. And so it's about planning early. So we already have started to look at social distancing. What does that look like? We even set up model classrooms to see what it would, we calculated, we used those math equations to figure out, with people who are a lot smarter than me, to figure out how many students we could fit in a space safely. It looks like, based on the size of our classrooms, we could fit about 14 kids in
in a room safely. Now, typical classroom sizes for us are anywhere between 18 and 23. So to be fair, we have to do something differently because we can't social distance in that type of way. So we're still working. We're still in the preliminary planning phases because we go back late August, early September, but we have orientations earlier, so we're planning that too. But we're going to believe that we're going to keep our online learning, have those platforms as we do in case we have to go completely online learning, because Cuomo has said he still is not 100% sure that schools will be open yet for kids coming back to school. So there is no plan exactly yet. So we're planning, and what the guidance from the governor that I read today is that we should have a plan for both options, and we should have a plan if we do come back and if we don't. So we have one already because we were already enacted it if we don't. But if we do, I think we're going to split kids in half and do an A and B day. So what that would look like is half the kids would, so if we had a classroom of 20, let's say 20 kids, 10 would come on one day, on A day, and then the other 10 would come on B day. And so when you're there on A day, the B day students will be watching through a live feed or doing like a Google Classroom. And then on B day, the A day kids would do the same. So that way there's a continuance of learning, there's consistency, and they're able to still be with teachers and be consistent with teachers. But we keep and adhere to guidelines to keep everybody safe. On top of that, you got to keep the employees safe. So we're going to institute a reporting system. We're also going to institute the temperature screening at the doors for employees and for students, where we do the facial scans of their temperature. I believe also the way that we clean, the cleaning procedures have had to change. So those are the way those disinfect, and on top of it, the UV lights. I believe we're going to be getting UV lights to be able to do that regularly throughout the classrooms to, I believe, at 99% accuracy. So we're putting a lot of things in place to assure that students are safe and that kids are safe. But again, these are things that cost money. They're taking time. These are resources. But the biggest and most important thing is, to me, is that parents know that their kid is going to be safe, that I'm not going to play games with their child's life, and I'm going to treat their children like they're my children. The same way with that graduation, where I love a graduation, but I wouldn't want my children to go to a graduation because of this is real. And so, it's about how do we handle it all? What's the plan?
So
currently?
very
Do you guys have
singular,
anything
but
cooking
remember,
over there?
we're throughout Texas. So each school looks very different. We have schools in urban areas and schools in rural places. And so with that, we're doing the temperature scans. We have completed the calculations and figured out how many students we can get in each classroom through social distancing. We've decided to remove all teacher desks and create a teacher zone with probably in the larger spaces, particularly places like gyms. We're going to have our teachers rotate rather than students rotating. So the desk will be gone and all of our teachers will be receiving carts. We've had conversations about, with teachers on how this is going to look, what are their expectations. I've asked every principal of mine to give me a needs list. I told them I did not care, what was on the list, but I wanted them to be strategic and intentional in figuring out what they needed for their specific building to make sure both students and staff are safe. And so we have things from, mobile tents outside for scanning stations, for hand washing areas before entering the building, working with facilities on cleaning procedures and what times of the day different places and areas in the school will be sanitized and clean. We're having all food being delivered to the classroom, and we are encouraging outdoor classroom usage as much as often, if weather permits. But again, with the social distancing, PE, we're even doing virtual PE lessons. So even, when kids are at home on this AB schedule, just like you guys are doing, that they're still getting this physical activity. We're in collaboration, right? So we're making sure that if we're going to implement this AB day, that we're intentionally looking at how our teachers are collaborating, what day that will be, and what's the protocol for that, so that we can make sure that our students are safe, whether they're at home or at school, and any troubles or hiccups that they face along the way, so that we can monitor and adjust weekly. So that's our plan right now.
Right. It sounds like you guys have put a lot of thought into it too, and I think that just brings me to closing, and to just encourage leaders to stand up and make decisions based off of what's right, not based off of what is the favorable decision, not based off of necessarily even what you feel in your heart. Your heart might be telling you, I love these babies, I want to do X, Y, and Z, I want to see my kids, I want them here in front of me, but at the end of the day, you need to dig down deep and do what's right and put safety before everything. And I learned a long time ago, if you want to run a building and you want it to run well, if you want to run a district, the first thing and foremost is safety. So if people are safe, then everything else can happen. So then learning can take place, everything else is possible. And safety doesn't necessarily always mean COVID safety, but it means safety from student violence, from violence from any type of area. But it means that you are caring and you are considering and you're putting your employees and your students' health first. So I'm urging people to do that, to take care of their people, and to make a decision based off of what's needed and not economics. Economics can't be the deciding factor. It has to be off of what you really, really need to keep people safe. And God bless, and I hope that everyone stays safe out there and that they continue to strive towards educational excellence.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. And again, don't forget, check out Vulnerable Voices every Wednesday. This is season 1. You can check us out on iTunes and YouTube. And don't forget, we have another episode we want you to check out. That's going to be next Wednesday. And the title of that episode is It's Lonely at the Top. Thanks.
All right. Y'all have a good week, and we'll see y'all next Wednesday.